Hey guys, Youngblood with you, and today we're going to talk about picking the right dropship. Now, this is kind of an interesting topic because there aren't really many ships that are specified for this role, and it's something that I hadn't really considered doing until CowChat suggested in the comments of my last video. So thanks bud, I appreciate the suggestion. So when we start talking about dropships, we're discussing the ability to bring troops to a fight and allow them to engage in FPS combat. And I think there's several different options to choose from, and I think they all vary drastically in how they support or how you choose which one is right to use in which situation. I'm not going to cover a one-man dropship in this video, because really any stealthy ship can probably find its way into the right landing pad and be fine. So we're talking about the ability to bring several folks to either, save another ship, maybe save a space station or engage a space station, or maybe it's to pirate another ship, or even just the plain flat-out ability to drop ships planetside, for a big battle. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and start with the two ships that we know have this ability built into them, either based on their modules or the overall purpose and design, and that's going to be the Redeemer and the Retaliator. Now, the Redeemer was built as a gunboat primarily, but it's also a dropship that is ready to deploy its troops. The Retaliator is a Navy bomber that's then been retrofitted into the role of a dropship, courtesy of the dropship module, which you can buy and install on this ship. Now, there's some stark differences between these two, and I think they're really important to talk about to make sure that you're getting the right one for you. One major factor to consider here is the number of people that you want to bring to the fight. If you're a smaller org or you don't need a massive amount of people, the Redeemer being able to drop 6 Marines is probably going to be plenty for you. You also have 2 turret gunners plus a pilot, so you could potentially drop 9 people out of this relatively small ship. Keep in mind, though, that dropping the pilot out means that you're then leaving your ship as a sitting duck to easily be destroyed or stolen. And with how badass the Redeemer is, you're not really going to want to see it stolen. I can just imagine being pissed off sitting there fighting, seeing your Redeemer flying around, and you're not the pilot. The Retaliator's dropship module carries 12 Marines, which is already more than the Redeemer's total, but that's only in this module. You've also got 5 turret spots and a pilot, so you're potentially dropping up to 18 people out of the Retaliator. There's a lot of other factors to consider though, and the situation is actually the most important one. If you're coming into a hot landing zone, you absolutely want the Redeemer. The Redeemer's points that make it right for this choice are that it's actually smaller, it's probably faster, it should be more agile, it has better forward-facing weaponry, and it's extremely tough with a large shield and a description talking about how it has it's basically an armored craft. Now, when you're talking about entering a hot landing zone, you want the ability to get your troops ready for quick deployment, and if you're talking about having your gunners bail out as well, you're not left totally defenseless like you are in the Retaliator because you've got the pilot-controlled weaponry. It's also going to be harder to hit and probably more durable while approaching the zone, not to mention if it's a moving target or a lot of crossfire, the smaller frame and that agility is going to help you get to where you need to be. The Retaliator isn't without its charm though, as that dropship module provides a lot of weapon racks, it's got power armor charging stations. I think it's the primary difference between these two is in picking the right fight. If you have a nice calm landing zone, then the Retaliator is a great option. The ship may be more defenseless while sitting, but it does give a better base of operations for your fire teams to kind of come back to if they need help, ammo, or armor charging. Now, I think between these two, it's all about your situation. If the landing zone is hot, the Redeemer wins every time. If the landing zone is calm, the Retaliator is kind of hard to beat in that regard. The Redeemer absolutely gives you more versatility in your drop missions, though, and if you're choosing one over the other, I think the Redeemer here is a no-brainer. Another consideration with these ships is the overall design, and I think we need to kind of see more on the Retaliator's dropship module. The Redeemer, for example, can open up the bottom hatch to drop your Marines without even having to fully land on your ship, so unless the Retaliator dropship module has that same thing, you may end up piling up Marines on the 2 elevators to exit the craft. I think we'll end up seeing some port actually there in the module, but it is a bit of an unknown right now. This port on the Redeemer also opens it up to better boarding for enemy ships, a little bit better in my mind, as you can likely dock and deploy as opposed to have to EVA them. Again, there is a docking port on the Retaliator where you don't have to use the elevators, or at least shouldn't, but the ship is much bigger, and getting it aligned to do what we're talking about here may be more of a chore and may make you a bigger target for others to try and come in and attack. I think the Retaliator is best suited for larger hangars or planet-side landings where the Redeemer can really fit into any boarding role. The last thing I want to mention about the Redeemer is that it's primarily a gunboat. And while that only has limited application in the deployment of your troops, you're getting an ability to leave the location and continue fighting to support your operations from the exterior, from the outside. It's a heavy fighting support ship in that regard, and it adds value to it as opposed to a ship that drops and stays put, or one that has to leave the combat zone or face potential elimination. Past these two, though, we get into a little bit of theory crafting to find ships that really meet this need, and I think the two that probably fit into this category second best would be the Cutlass Black and the Cutlass Blue. If you choose to go with the blue, I would encourage you to take out at least the majority of the holding cells to open up more seating in the back of the ship, similar to what the Cutlass Black has standard. We've already seen and played around with an ability to fly with passengers in the back of the Cutlass, and with the turret slot plus the co-pilot plus the rear seating, you should be able to bring a decent-sized group to the location to kind of reap havoc. I put them both in this group because they're both very similar overall, but I think there's a few slight differences that could make the difference in which one you end up choosing. The Black is already equipped with low signature engines, so if your plan is to try and sneak on board, you could potentially cut power to the majority of your systems and hope to kind of line up your landing approach prior to being detected and try and kind of cruise in silently. That sounds a little bit tricky, but so are Cutlass pilots, so that kind of works out in the end. Also, if you're trying to board another ship or a station through a hatch, that stealth ability may give you an extra advantage in a successful approach. I think that's the one situation where the Black is probably the better choice over the blue. The reason I chose the blue over the Black in general is based on the better armor and shielding. You know, the majority of your boardings aren't going to happen peacefully, so whether that means fighting to disable your target, or being able to take, fire from exterior sources while you're trying to get into a more protected landing bay, I think the blue gives you that durability that gives you a better shot at a successful mission. One huge perk for the Cutlass line is maneuverability. They possess a lot of it, and if you're trying to align with a target to drop your crew, or if you're needing to hit a moving target, you should be able to do this fairly easily. In addition, you've got the hatch and the docking collars making the Cutlass well designed for boarding actions in their current state too. I think that Cutlass, outside of the more, true dropships, is probably your second best option. Now, another ship, kind of in the similar size range, that might have some success in this role could be the Freelancer series, ideally the Freelancer Max. And depending on what we see from further developments and customization, if you're able to put seats in the back of a Max, or if there's some sort of stability option to help your folks not get clobbered by your maneuvering, the Max makes an interesting option. It's got 4 large engines with lightweight cargo, i.e. people, which should make it fairly quick in its approach. It's important to also note that the ship is definitely not designed with this in mind. So don't expect wild and daring ship-to-ship boarding with this, because you don't have the same docking collar that we talked about with the Redeemer and the Cutlass lines. You're going to likely have to actually land this ship and drop the cargo door for your troops to then leave. That's also not a real protected exit. In addition, we're not talking about a real combat ship here, so being the first ship in is probably not the best situation for the Max. I think where it could find some success would maybe be as a second wave of troops. Something like having a Redeemer come in first, drop the heavy Marines to do the first bit of fighting, while you then have a Max come in with backup after the Redeemer is cleared out. I don't think it's a great fit for this role, but when we're talking about the limited options that we've got available, I think it actually probably would do surprisingly well. And the last two that I want to talk about are much larger, but they have their value. The Javelin Destroyer is obviously a very large ship, and it doesn't really fit the bill as a dropship in and of itself. The reason it's on this list is because of its ability to carry a Redeemer in its hangar. I envision a situation where the Javelin stands back, peppering its target from afar, while the first Redeemer then takes off to deploy troops. Then almost in like a rotation, 2 to 3 Redeemers dock, get more passengers, and then go drop them off. Depending on the troop capacity of the Javelin, this could bring a fairly massive force to any target to kind of help just flat out overwhelm the enemies. In addition, a Javelin supporting Redeemers, who are also more than capable of fighting effectively, you've got a really nasty situation, at least for the enemies. And the last ship gets on this list based on its just troop carrying qualification, and that's the Genesis Starliner. And while the Genesis is hardly a combat option capable of supporting, in-space combat drops, it's certainly more than capable of bringing troops to a large-scale combat zone, especially on large stations with big enough landing zones or planets. So if you're talking about sheer numbers, it's hard to envision anything being a better option than the Starliner in taking troops from point A to point B. I agree, it's very limited, but in the right situation, it could be overwhelming. So there's obviously other ships that could do this role, like the Constellations or potentially the Caterpillar. But if we're talking about what I feel are best suited to this environment, I think my suggestions before all make a lot of sense. Nothing really tops the Redeemer in my eyes as far as this is concerned, but from there are other options, most importantly considering the situation you're trying to accomplish this in. So there you have it. If you have other questions, maybe recommendations for people, throw them in the comments, we'll talk through them. Otherwise, I appreciate you guys watching. As always, stay tuned for more content. Have yourselves a wonderful day, and take care.